lounge, the movement stopped. But she didn't wake. Without saying a word, Julia guided Jessie back to her bed, which she climbed back into with ease. It hadn't been as simple the night before. After tucking Jessie back in, Julia gazed down at the girl, wondering how she had survived living on the streets for so long. Jessie hadn't talked much about it, so Julia hadn't asked, but it didn't mean she wasn't curious. Julia turned and spotted a book on Jessie's nightstand. The cover and title made her smile. She picked up Baking for Beginners and flicked to the front page. It seemed that Jessie had borrowed it from Perrydale's tiny library without Julia's knowledge. In the weeks Jessie had been working in the cafe, she had been clearing tables, washing up, and assisting in Julia's baking. Julia could sense Jessie was itching to get her hands properly stuck into baking her own creations. When she seemed at peace in bed, Julia placed the cookbook exactly where she had found it. She backed out of the room, cautiously closing the creaking door. She walked past her own bedroom and straight into the kitchen. She dropped one of her favourite peppermint and licorice tea bags into a cup and filled the kettle. She flicked on her under-counter lights and pulled up a stool. The cat clock, with the flickering eyes and swishing tail, told her it was a little after 6. Letting out a slow yawn, she knew she would pay for her early start later, in the cafe. Saturdays were always the busiest days, but at least she had Jessie's help now. Julia cast her eyes to the white envelope sitting on the corner of her counter. The divorce papers enclosed within had been read over and signed, and the envelope resealed ready for posting to her solicitor. She wanted to post them, but just like a bad cold, she was finding it difficult to get rid of them. The moment they were with her solicitor again, she would be divorced. Considering she didn't much like her soon-to-be ex-husband, she should have been happy about finally cutting ties from him. But happiness was an emotion that evaded anything surrounding the breakup. More than anything, she felt she'd failed. Not just her marriage, but herself. She had changed so much, and abandoned her village to join her husband Gerard in London. 12 years later, she found her bags on the doorstep, along with a note telling her he had changed the locks because he was in love with his secretary, who was 10 years Julia's junior and 20 pounds lighter around the middle. 2 years later, Julia now owned her small cottage on the outskirts of Perrydale, the village she had grown up in. She'd opened her own cafe in the heart of the community, and now she had a lodger, as well as her cat. She felt she was truly content with her life, which didn't explain to her why she was clinging on to the envelope. Tossing back the last of her tea, she cursed herself under her breath. She promised herself today would be the day she dropped them in at the post office. No more excuses. Jessie woke with her alarm clock at 8. The sun was high in the clear sky, and Julia was already washed and dressed for work. She'd also already made good progress with her usual morning baking to fill the display cases in her cafe. "This was on the doormat," Jessie grumbled as she scratched her hair, flinging a lavender envelope on top of the divorce papers. "I had the craziest dream last night." "Oh?" Julia asked, avoiding Jessie's still half-closed eyes. "What about?" "It's already gone," Jessie said with a shrug. "What are you baking?" "I'm trying to perfect Sally and Richard's wedding cake recipe," Julia said, pushing a finished cupcake in front of Jessie. "I just can't seem to get the balance right." Jessie took a big bite out of the cupcake. Julia didn't have to wait long for the verdict. Jessie immediately spat the mixture back into the cake casing and pulled a face that reminded Julia of the time Mowgli licked chili powder off the counter. "Oh, God! What's in that?" "Cinnamon, orange and rose," Julia said with a heavy sigh, looking at the dozen cupcakes she'd just baked, hoping to be